Halli, hallo, hallöchen und willkommen zurück zu einem weiteren Livestream mit mir, Herrn Antrem. Und heute Abend werden wir über Schule und Uni sprechen. Ich habe eine kleine Präsentation zusammen gebastelt, würde ich sagen. Und ja, wir werden eine kurze Geschichte lesen und darüber sprechen, ein paar Fragen beantworten. Und wenn das dich interessiert, dann ja, bleib einfach da. Wir fangen zuerst an mit dieser Präsentation. Mein Gesicht ist in dem Weg, aber unsere Titel für heute, das ist Schule und Uni, besonders mit Vokabeln, Szenen und echte Beispiele. So, darüber werden wir heute sprechen. In der ersten Geschichte erlebt Lena ihren letzten regulären Schultag am Gymnasium. In der zweiten Geschichte macht sie ihre Abi-Prüfung und bekommt ihr Abiturzeugnis. In der dritten Geschichte beginnt sie ihr Studium an einer Universität. Unterwegs lernen wir den Wortschatz und die Formulierung, die man braucht, wenn man über Schule, Prüfungen und das Studium sprechen möchte. Wir schauen uns außerdem einige Unterschiede zwischen dem deutschen und amerikanischen Bildungssystem an. Dabei gilt es natürlich, Schulen unterscheiden sich, Universitäten unterscheiden sich und in Deutschland hängt besonders viel von Bundesstaat ab. Das ist Lena Hoffmann, wie ich schon gesagt habe. Das ist Lena Hoffmann. Lena besucht ein Gymnasium und ist in der Oberstufe. Ihre Schulzeit ist fast vorbei. Zuerst erleben wir mit ihr einen der letzten regulären Schultage. Lena spricht mit ihrem Mitschüler Jonas über den Unterricht und ihre bevorstehenden Prüfungen. Danach schreibt Lena ihre Abiturprüfung. Sie muss schriftliche und mündliche Prüfungen ablegen, bevor sie ihr Abiturzeugnis bekommt. Schließlich bekommt Lena ein Geschichtsstudium. An der Universität muss sie sich mit einem neuen Stundenplan, neuen Veranstaltungsarten und viel mehr Selbstständigkeit zurechtfinden. Die Geschichten sind erfunden, aber der Wortschatz und die Situationen sind realistisch. Bevor die erste Geschichte beginnt, brauchen wir einen wichtigen Unterschied. The English word to study is not always translated with studieren. Lernen means that you are learning something or studying material. So, for instance, Lena lernt für ihre Prüfung, sie lernt Englisch. Studieren is generally meaning that someone is enrolled at a university and is studying an academic subject. So, Lena studiert Geschichte, sie studiert an einer Universität. If you were simply learning German, you would say, ich lerne Deutsch. If your German is an academic study at a university, you might say, ich studiere Deutsch. More precisely, you would probably say, ich studiere Germanistik, because that's usually what they call it when you're studying it at a university. The distinction will become important whenever she gets to the school versus university style of learning here. So, Lena ist noch Schülerin. That's important. In German, someone attending a school is eine Schüler, ein Schüler oder eine Schülerin. We do not normally call her eine Studentin until she becomes that at the university level. Lena is completing the Oberstufe at her Gymnasium. The regular lessons are almost finished, but the Abitur examinations are still ahead of her. Here are 7 words that appear in the story, which I've already mentioned before. Das Gymnasium is one type of German secondary school. It generally follows an academically oriented plan and is leading towards the Abitur and eventually the university level. Die Oberstufe refers to the final phase of the gymnasium school. Its exact organization and length kind of depends on the Bundesland in which it stays, but it's generally speaking like the 11th, 12th, and 13th year, sometimes just the 12th and 13th year, kind of depends on where you are in the country. Der Stundenplan is a timetable or class schedule. Der Unterricht is the instruction or class. Der Mitschüler oder die Mitschülerin refers to a classmate at school. Die Klausur is a formal written examination. The exact terminology used for school assessments, of course, can vary a little bit. And die Hausaufgaben are homework in German. Lena fährt wie immer mit dem Bus zur Schule. Auf dem Flur trifft sie ihren Mitschüler Jonas. So Lena travels with the bus. When the German uses a method of transportation, we use mit, and that noun is then followed with the dative case. So for instance, mit dem Bus, mit dem Auto, mit dem Fahrrad. Yeah? At school, Lena meets a friend Jonas auf dem Flur. Der Flur is the school hallway. Flur is also just kind of the word for hallway in general. Jonas asks, was haben wir in der ersten Stunde? At school, die erste Stunde means the first period. It doesn't necessarily mean the exact 60 minutes, like an hour, eine Stunde, but it's kind of used interchangeably in the same way that it is in English. When we say, first hour I have this, we don't actually mean a full, actual 60-minute hour. Lena answers with Geschichte. Danach haben wir noch Mathematik und Englisch. German students commonly will just use haben with their scheduled subjects. So, wir haben heute Deutsch, ich habe in der ersten Stunde Mathematik. In the first class, the teacher says, schlagt eure Bücher auf Seite 84 auf. The separable prefix verb here is aufschlagen, to open a book at a particular place. She continues, bearbeitet danach die Aufgaben 3 bis 5. Eine Aufgabe bearbeiten means to work on or complete an exercise. And Jonas then asks, müssen wir die Antworten in ganzen Sätzen schreiben? And this is helpful whenever we're talking about things in a classroom. You might say, müssen wir, do we have to, in a variety of different situations. Just don't forget that your other verb needs to be at the end of the sentence for those. The teacher responds, gebt eure Arbeitsblätter am Ende der Stunde ab, meaning that you have to turn in the assignment at the end of the hour. And the separable verb here, abgeben, means that we have to hand in or submit something. And again, notice that that prefix is at the end of the sentence there. Also notice that the teacher uses the informal plural imperative forms. That's because she's addressing the entire class as ihr. So whenever you're talking to students, especially at the high school level, you're probably going to be using the du form with an individual student, the ihr form with the multiple students. I have seen a lot of German teachers who will change to the Sie form whenever they either turn 18 or when they get to a certain grade level. Kind of depends on the teacher what the protocol is there, but long story short, they generally use the du form when talking to students of high school or below level, and then older students get the Sie form treatment. So we have a few examples of separable prefixes in this part of the story. We have schlagt auf. Bearbeitet does not have a separable prefix. It has an inseparable prefix, that be at the beginning of it. And then gebt ab is again one of those separable prefix verbs. After class, Jonas asks, gehst du gleich nach Hause? Gleich here means simply shortly or right away. Lena then responds, noch nicht, ich muss in die Bibliothek. She hasn't finished her homework in English, of course, which is why she's saying, ich habe meine Hausaufgaben für Englisch noch nicht fertig. I don't have my homework for English finished yet. Then Jonas asks, lernst du danach für die Abiturprüfung? So are you studying for the Abitur after that? Für die Prüfung lernen is the prepositional phrase that we would use here to specifically say that she's learning for a particular test. So we're saying that she is studying for that test. But again, make sure that you're not using the word studieren here, as that would be improper. Lena then says, im Moment lerne ich fast jeden Abend, which means at the moment I'm pretty much studying every evening. This shows not only the use of lernen and not studieren again, and that's because she is preparing for an examination. She is not starting to study at the university, which is why we don't use studieren here. Also notice that we have this temporal phrase here, im Moment, and that means at the moment or currently. When we said that in the beginning of the sentence, we have im Moment lerne ich. That pushes the subject to the other side of the verb there. So instead of saying ich lerne im Moment fast jeden Tag, I'm studying almost every day at the moment, instead we put im Moment at the beginning of the sentence and we push ich to the other side of lerne there. All right, we're going to go back and read the full story here for Teil 1 bis 3, der Morgen. Lena fährt wie immer mit dem Bus zur Schule. Auf dem Flur trifft sie ihren Mitschüler Jonas. Was haben wir in der ersten Stunde? Geschichte. Danach haben wir noch Mathematik und Englisch. Schlagt eure Bücher auf Seite 84 auf. Bearbeitet danach die Aufgaben 3 bis 5. Müssen wir die Antworten in ganzen Sätzen schreiben? Ja. Gebt eure Arbeitsblätter am Ende der Stunde ab. Gehst du gleich nach Hause? Noch nicht. Ich muss in die Bibliothek. Ich bin mit meinen Englisch-Hausaufgaben noch nicht fertig. Lernst du danach für die Abiturprüfung? Ja, im Moment lerne ich fast jeden Abend. Alright, so now we got to the point where we can talk about some phrases that might be helpful in various situations. So the most reusable parts of this story are as follows. Was haben wir in der ersten Stunde? This is what do we have in the first hour. You can replace this with pretty much any time that you want. So you can say, was haben wir in der dritten Stunde? Was haben wir nach der Pause, for instance. Then there's also the phrase, müssen wir ganze Sätze schreiben, or I think the original was in ganzen Sätzen schreiben. And that is müssen wir. So you can say, do we have to? And then you can use this with all kinds of different phrases. Müssen wir den Text lesen? Do we have to read the text? Müssen wir das heute abgeben? Müssen wir das heute abgeben? Do we have to turn that in today? Müssen wir zu zweit arbeiten? Do we have to work in pairs? Ich bin noch nicht fertig is another helpful phrase. It means I'm not yet finished. So, noch nicht fertig. Ich bin fertig would mean I'm done. Ich bin noch nicht fertig, I'm not quite done. Was müssen wir, or wann müssen wir das abgeben? This one asks about a deadline here. So we have, the abgeben being to turn in something. And finally, the last phrase that would be helpful here is ich muss für die Prüfung lernen. I have to study for the test. And you can switch out die Prüfung with other things that you might have to study for. Den Test, for instance, would be a good option. Die Klausur, which is another word for a test. And die Mathearbeit, which is the math work. Now we're going to talk about a false friend. I've mentioned the word gymnasium before in here, and a false friend is basically a word that looks like or sounds like an English word, but is actually not the same as the English word. So for instance, in modern German, the word das Gymnasium is not the room where you get to go play basketball or whatever. That would be die Turnhalle or die Sporthalle if you're going to go play sports. A gymnasium is an academically oriented secondary school. It is generally going to lead towards the Abitur, which then leads to the Universität. It's also important to say that the Gymnasium is not simply the German word for high school. An American high school serves a broader student population and does not correspond perfectly to the German school system type. Depending on the context, the high school may be explained as eine amerikanische Highschool, or more generally, they might just say eine weiterführende Schule. The graphic on screen here is a little bit small, but there's not really much I can do about that. I think I put it in the description as well, but I could be wrong. But the graphic basically gives us a simplified overview of what the German school system would be. Most students will start off with Grundschule, and Grundschule is grades 1 through 4 in most places. It does sometimes go through 5 or 6, and then they have like a transition period, but again, that's going to kind of depend on the state that you're in. After that, there are several possibilities for secondary education, including the Gymnasium, which we've already mentioned, the Realschule, and the Hauptschule. And then there's also a thing that is like a combined thing called a Gesamtschule. There's a couple of other options depending on the state again. It's a little bit confusing with the way that the Germans have so many different schools that you can go to as a secondary school. In the graphic here, the graphic translates the word gymnasium as a grammar school, but there's not really a perfect one-to-one translation from German to English for the word gymnasium here. The names in the organization are considerably changing by Bundesland. Lena's Gymnasium is one possible path, but it's not the exact path that every German student might take. So for instance, you can go to a Realschule and then you can transition from the Realschule into the Gymnasium and then continue studying there so that then you can go on to your Abitur and stuff like that. It's a lot of give and take, a lot of transitioning between the different levels that you can go to. There's different paths that you can take that will take you to different opportunities. So just because you start out at the Hauptschule doesn't mean that you're going to end up with the Hauptschule. It also doesn't mean that you're going to get a Hauptschule type job, which generally means like physical labor, things that you're doing with your hands, something that might require an apprenticeship or something like that. There's a lot of details that go into it, but honestly, that's not the real purpose of this particular live stream, so I don't want to go too deep into the German school system. If you'd like me to, do an analyzation of the German school system at some point, yeah, I'll see if I can put something together for that, but it's not really the point of today's lessons. Geschichte Nummer 2. So several weeks have passed after the last story that we read, and Lena's regular lessons have finished, and now her Abitur examinations have begun. The Abitur is both the qualification that she's working toward, and also in everyday language it's what they call the examination period associated with that qualification. So when somebody says, ich habe mein Abitur, that is saying like I have the certificate, but if you say like, ich schreibe diese Woche mein Abitur, like I'm writing my Abitur this week, they're talking about the examination, and they're kind of used interchangeably like that. We can say Lena macht ihr Abitur, Lena schreibt ihr Abitur, and Lena hat ihr Abitur bestanden. All of those are perfectly fine sentences. She is doing the Abitur, she is writing the Abitur, and she passed the Abitur. The natural phrasing kind of depends on whether you are talking about the overall process, the written examinations, or the final results. The central vocabulary for the Abitur are as follows. Die schriftliche Prüfung is a written examination. Die mündliche Prüfung is an oral exam. Die Aufgabe can be an exercise, an assignment, a question, or a task. Kind of depends on the context. Die Note is what we use for a grade. Bestehen means to pass an examination. Durchfallen means to fail, but be careful here because there is also the word der Durchfall, which is not related to these things in the same way that you might think. Durchfall means diarrhea, and you might say that this is a term that is sweeping the nation here in the United States at the moment, but if you're curious, Google that. At the end, Lena hopes to receive das Abiturzeugnis, which is basically a certificate saying that she finished her Abitur. That's the certificate that she gets. It's documenting her results for the Abitur. All right, now let's see how the Abitur goes for her. Geschichte 2, Teil 1, die schriftliche Prüfung. Lena sitzt mit den anderen Prüflingen im Prüfungsraum. Der Lehrer sagt, Sie dürfen jetzt anfangen, Sie haben 4 Stunden Zeit. Lena liest zuerst alle Aufgaben, dann entscheidet sie sich für die zweite Aufgabe. So, Lena is sitting with other Prüflinge, and der Prüfling is basically just a person who's taking the examination, and it's kind of a word that we use, whether it's the Abitur or other ones, it doesn't really matter. Prüfling is from the word Prüfung, and so we use those as like someone who's taking a test. Prüfung is the test, Prüfling is the person taking the test. There's also dem Prüfungsraum. They are in dem Prüfungsraum, so they're in this testing room. The teacher says, Sie dürfen jetzt anfangen, Sie haben 4 Stunden Zeit. So the teacher uses here the formal Sie, and you can use this, a lot of times they'll use this in like formal situations, especially like examination rooms, and it's instructions in various classrooms. They may change between the do form or the Sie form, kind of depending on, again, level of the student and the age of the student and that kind of thing. Lena reads the tasks before she chooses the second one, which is always good advice when you're taking a test. And it says, Sie entscheidet sich für die zweite Aufgabe. So notice the pattern, sich für etwas entscheiden, which is to decide for something. So you're picking something out of a group. So in this case, she has several different assignments that she could do, and she chose one of those. A lot of examinations will give you something that says like, choose one of the following prompts and write your response. And so the first one may be an argumentative essay, the second one may be more of an informational presenting kind of thing, and it kind of just depends on what the purpose of the exam is. Now, für sich für etwas entscheiden could also be used in an example like, ich entscheide mich für Aufgabe 2. I am deciding for option number 2. Teil 2 von der Geschichte, Teil 2. 1 week later, Lena has her oral examination in history for this. And so this is die mündliche Prüfung. Eine Woche später hat Lena ihre mündliche Prüfung in Geschichte. Die Prüferin sagt, möchten Sie noch etwas ergänzen? Ja, ein weiterer wichtiger Grund war... Nach 20 Minuten darf Lena den Raum verlassen. So, this is kind of a vague one. I've left it vague on purpose, so apologies if that seems like I just avoided using any terminology whatsoever. So the examiner asks, möchten Sie noch etwas ergänzen? And etwas ergänzen means something like to add something or provide additional information. So she's asking like, you're doing an oral examination. That basically means that you are answering questions and kind of responding in real time to a person who's giving the exam. And if that's the case, then you may have to explain yourself in further details, for instance. Lena responds with, ja, ein weiterer wichtiger Grund war, which is another important reason was, and so you might start that as the beginning of your sentence and then go on to explain why this thing was important that you're talking about. It's another useful phrase if you are in a examination, that is. So another one would be phrases that you might need while you're in the examination. You can use ein weiterer Grund war, so another reason was, or you can say something like ein weiteres Beispiel ist, which would be another example is. Außerdem muss man berücksichtigen, dass, so besides that you have to take account for whatever it is that you're about to say. After about 20 minutes, darf Lena den Raum verlassen. After about 20 minutes, she is allowed to leave the room. She has completed the exam but doesn't know her final results yet. That's what we're going to get in another part. The examiner and examinee use the Sie form back and forth, and the language is more structured than a normal classroom conversation because they have kind of a script that the teacher has to use, and they have a set protocol for what the students should be doing in that examination room. Teil 3, das Ergebnis. Einige Wochen später kommt Lena ihr Abiturzeugnis. So a few weeks later, she receives her kind of certificate. Jonas sagt, und, hast du bestanden? Lena sagt, ja, meine mündliche Prüfung war besser als erwartet. Jonas sagt, herzlichen Glückwunsch. Lena sagt, danke, jetzt kann ich mich an der Uni bewerben. Several weeks later, she receives her Abiturzeugnis, the certificate that tells her how she did. And Jonas asks, hast du bestanden, which is, did you pass? You could say like a fuller sentence would be like, hast du die Prüfung bestanden, meaning did you pass the test? Hast du dein Abi bestanden? Did you pass your Abitur? But when the context is clear, you don't really have to have the extra words in there. You can just say, hast du bestanden? Lena answers with, ja, meine mündliche Prüfung war besser als erwartet. And this means that she is getting results that are better than expected on the oral examination part. Jonas says, herzlichen Glückwunsch. And this is basically a standard way to congratulate anybody in any circumstances. Herzlichen Glückwunsch is just kind of what you would say. It's a happy birthday, it's a happy wedding, it's a happy whatever. It's basically just like congratulations. A few helpful phrases that you might need would be something like Lena macht ihr Abitur, which means she is completing the overall Abitur process. Lena schreibt ihre Abiturprüfungen. She's writing the written examinations for the Abitur. And Lena hat das Abitur bestanden means that she passed the Abitur. She then also says, jetzt kann ich mich an der Uni einschreiben oder bewerben. And this means that we can apply for the university, or you can try to get into a particular university. Vor der Prüfung. These phrases work at school and in the university and in many professional places. So before the examination, vor der Prüfung, we have a few phrases. Ich muss noch lernen would be I still have to study. Ich bin ziemlich nervös. I am kind of nervous. Ich fühle mich gut vorbereitet. I feel well prepared. Ich fühle mich überhaupt nicht vorbereitet. I don't feel prepared at all. So, options for phrases you can talk about before you take an exam. After the exam, here are a few other phrases that you might need. So, nach der Prüfung. Wie ist der Prüfung gelaufen? How did the test go? Possible answers might include, we got positive on the left and negative on the right. So, ganz gut, glaube ich. So, very well, I think. Nicht besonders gut would be like not very well or not especially well. Besser als erwartet. Schlechter als erwartet, which would be better than expected or worse than expected. Then there is the result as the final result. Ich habe bestanden, which is I passed. Ich bin durchgefallen, I fell through is what it literally says, but it means I failed. Notice that the auxiliary verbs are in here. We have habe bestanden and bin durchgefallen, and that's because bestanden comes from the root word stehen. Stehen means to stand, and so you're saying like I stood through this, that's bestanden. That uses a form of haben as the helping verb in the past tense. Whereas durchfallen has the word fallen, which is to fall, and so it uses a form of sein in there whenever you're using the past tense or the perfect tense for those. Got a little gnat in here. Let's talk about Noten and Punkte. So German grading becomes a little bit more complicated in the Oberstufe. Oberstufe, again, being that upper level of the German school. So in the familiar German school system scale, 1 is very good and 6 is very, 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 very bad. But 1 ist sehr gut, 2 gut, 3 ist befriedigend, 4 ist ausreichend und dann 5 und 6 sind sehr, sehr schlecht. So, Nummer 5 ist mangelhaft und Nummer 6 ungenügend. So we have very good, good, satisfactory, sufficient, and then kind of terrible or insufficient, and then ungenügend is not enough, essentially. So both 5 and 6 are considered to be failing grades, and I think the only difference is that a 5 is like you tried but you just didn't hit the mark, as opposed to a 6, which is like you really just didn't give me enough information for me to say yes you passed, no you didn't pass, whatever. So that's kind of a problem there. Those are the numbers up until the Oberstufe. Once you get into the Oberstufe, things start to be a little bit more different. So they more frequently give you some feedback about what it is that you're doing. They give you more into the point system, and therefore we have a 15-point system, and it starts at 15 being good and 0 being really, 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 really bad. So 15 Punkte entsprechen der besten Leitungsstufe, which is 15 points is the highest you can possibly get. And then 0, 0 points represents an inefficient result, meaning that you simply didn't give them enough information to even give you a proper grade for it. The points in the courses and the examinations contribute to the final Abitur result, according to the rules that, again, don't forget, they vary from Bundesland to Bundesland. But basically, you take your examination grades that you got on the Abitur test itself, and you combine that with the last couple of years of your schooling at the gymnasium, and you put those two together, they calculate a score, and then that score is then given to you as something that you can say, hey, University B, this is my score, and I think you should let me in. For this language lesson, of course, you can just, you don't need to actually calculate the Abitur score. You can just recognize that we have die Note, which is a grade, die Punkte, which would be the points, bestehen, which means to pass, durchfallen, which means to fail, and das Abiturzeugnis, which is your certificate for doing the Abitur. All right, we're up to Geschichte Nummer 3 at this point. Geschichte Nummer 3 is der erste Tag an der Uni, so the first day at the university. And of course, we have some more helpful vocabulary that you might need here. So this is several months later. She's enrolled at the university. She's no longer eine Schülerin. She is now eine Studentin. So she is officially a Studentin instead of a Schüler. So she wants to study history, so she's majoring in history, if you want to phrase it like that for the English viewers out there. But you would say, Lena studiert Geschichte. She is studying history. This is her first semester, so sie ist im ersten Semester. She is in the first semester. The first semester is a major transition because the organization and the vocabulary of the university varies a lot compared to the schooling vocabulary in a school like a gymnasium. Lena's Studiengang is her degree program. So Studiengang up there at the top of the vocab list. It basically is like, I am going to get this degree when I graduate. That's the name of that thing, is the Studiengang. She is in her first Semester, Semester being the same word that we use in English. Der Campus is, of course, the university campus. It's very similar to the English in that it's literally the same word. Der Hörsaal is a lecture hall. So if you are sitting in a room with, 100 and some odd other people and you're just listening to the teacher drone on for a while, that's probably a Hörsaal. Die Vorlesung is a common, larger lecture-oriented type class. Das Seminar is commonly similar, smaller and more discussion-oriented. So a seminar, you might have like 15 kids in your class, or 15 people, I guess. They're not kids at that point; they're university students, but you'll have like 15 people in there, and you'll have a discussion, and you'll have to read some text, and then give your opinions and stuff like that. I've had English classes and philosophy classes and stuff like that that are in that general genre of das Seminar. Die Mensa is the university, which is a university cafeteria or the dining hall. I mentioned in one of my other live streams, I think, is that I didn't learn the word Mensa until I was in Germany at the university, and someone's like, all right, the next stop that we're doing is the Mensa. And I was like, what's a Mensa? I don't even know what we're doing, but I'm just going to follow you because you told me that's the next thing we're doing. But anyway, that's die Mensa. And then die Sprechstunde is a professor's instructional office hours. So we call them office hours here in the US, but basically it just means that the professor is available for you to stop by, ask questions about something that you have going on in class, or some sort of an assignment that you have coming up or whatever. Again, the exact form of the courses, the university organization, all depends on the institution, the degree that you're going for, and all of that kind of thing, but these terms are generally widely used in a variety of different situations. The two university pictures that I have here on the screen, the one on the right is Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, and that's where I studied abroad. That was my university there. That is the Humboldt University in Berlin. And then the one on the left is Heidelberg-Universität, which is the university in Heidelberg. It is a fantastic university. I've had lots of friends from Germany who went through that university, and also it's good for teachers becoming teachers. They kind of teach teachers how to teach there. All right, Geschichte Nummer 3, Teil 1, auf dem Campus. So part 1, on the campus. Lene sucht den Hörsaal für ihre erste Vorlesung. Lene sagt, Entschuldigung, wissen Sie, wo Hörsaal B ist? Ein Student sagt, ja, gehen Sie durch diese Tür und dann die Treppe hoch. Lene sagt, vielen Dank. So Lena is on an unfamiliar campus and can't find her lecture hall, and she asks, Entschuldigung, wissen Sie, wo Hörsaal B ist? So, excuse me, do you know where the lecture hall B is. I tried to keep this simple because I assume that it's not going to be like lecture hall A, B, C, D. There's probably more than just 4 lecture halls at a university. But this is a good example of an indirect question. So notice the verb moves to the end of the dependent clause. So wo Hörsaal B ist. Ist is at the end of all of that, and that's because we used here a indirect question. So do you know where this thing is? Wo ist Hörsaal B would be like the normal sentence structure. Wissen Sie, wo Hörsaal B ist is the phrasing that we used here. The other student gives some directions and uses the Sie form when doing so. So we have gehen Sie durch diese Tür und dann die Treppe hoch. So useful phrases here might be durch die Tür, die Treppe hoch is to take the stairs up. If you wanted to say take the stairs down instead, you would use the word runter and you would say die Treppe runter. Nach links would be to the left and nach rechts would be to the right. And then im zweiten Stock would be in the second floor. Zweiten Stock would be what we Americans would call the third floor, British would call the second floor, but in German we call it the zweite Stock. Zweites Stock. Geschichte 3, Teil 2, die erste Vorlesung, so the first lecture. Im Hörsaal setzt sich Lena neben einer Studentin namens Amira. Amira sagt, studierst du auch Geschichte? Lena sagt, ja, ich bin im ersten Semester. Amira sagt, ich auch. Nach der Vorlesung habe ich noch ein Seminar. So, they're in a lecture hall and she meets some kid named Amira. Amira says, studierst du auch Geschichte? This means that she is asking, does Lena study history at the university? And the word auch in here is telling us that she also studies at the university using the same vocabulary there. Lena answers, ja, ich bin im ersten Semester. Yes, I am in the first semester. In German, we would have im ersten Semester, im dritten Semester, im fünften Semester, and you count up by semesters, so you can say how many semesters you've been in the university. You could also use ja instead and say I've been here for so many years. That also works as an option. One thing that I would mention here is that we use the do form here instead of using the Z form. And you may be asking why we went from high school uses the do form or the gymnasium uses the do form with students versus teachers. So teacher uses the do form to the student then uses the Z form with the teacher. Eventually this teacher will switch to the Z form and then they use Z back and forth to each other. But when we get to university students at the university level, the students are going to use the do form with each other, regardless of whether or not they've actually met each other before. This is something that kind of throws people off guard because textbooks like to say like the Z form is for strangers, and then you meet a stranger and you use the do form immediately. Part of this has to do with the casual nature of a university. Part of this has to do with young people not caring about the Z form anymore. And there's a bunch of different factors that go into it, but long story short, I use the do form here because that's what all of my friends at the university did in Germany while I was there. That also may have something to do with the Berlin aspect of it all, because I did my study abroad in Berlin, and they're kind of notoriously laid back in the way that they use the language. So everyone gets the do form all the time. Here we see two different forms of university teaching mentioned. A Vorlesung, as I mentioned before, is a lecture-oriented class, usually a large number of students in there. And then a Seminar is a smaller and probably requires more discussion or reading and student presentations and that kind of thing. Teil 3 von Geschichte Nummer 3, nach der Vorlesung. Amira sagt, wollen wir in der Mensa essen? Lena sagt, gern. Ich muss aber vorher noch zum Prüfungsamt. Gibt es ein Problem? Fragt Amira. Lena sagt, meine Anmeldung für eine Prüfung funktioniert nicht. So, after the lecture, Amira asks her, wollen wir in der Mensa essen? Which is kind of a natural way for you to just suggest, hey, you want to go do something after this, since we sat next to each other in that boring lecture for the last hour? Lena responds, gern, which is a single syllable and single word answer for kind of gladly. It's like saying yes, but happily, rather than saying just ja. Then she says, ich muss aber vorher noch zum Prüfungsamt, which means I still have to go to the testing office before that. Vorher means before that. Das Prüfungsamt is the office responsible for examinations related to anything at the university. You may have to contact them to take your final exam. You may have to contact them to take a particular type of test or something like that. And they generally administer all of the tests that are necessary. Lena explains, meine Anmeldung für eine Prüfung funktioniert nicht, which means my registration for a particular test is not functioning or not working. There's the noun die Anmeldung, which is also a helpful one here. You can also use the word anmelden, but when you do that, you should probably use it as the reflexive. So you would say something like sich für eine Prüfung anmelden, which would be to register oneself for an examination. Ich muss mich bis Freitag für die Prüfung anmelden, which is I have to register for the test by Friday. So, as an exam. All right, so we have some nützliche Fragen here, the helpful phrases or helpful questions. Wo findet die Vorlesung statt? Where does the lecture take place? Again, stattfinden is another one of those separable prefix verbs. So we have statt at the end of the sentence, and we have finden up where the verb gets conjugated. Bis wann muss ich mich anmelden? So by when do I have to register for this? So you're asking for the deadline there. Kann ich das online machen? Can I do that online? It's a simple question, but it's pretty useful, especially at the organizational level. Was mache ich, wenn es nicht funktioniert? What do I do when it doesn't work? That's a good question to do, but you could also use this as a kind of sentence structure setup so that you can use this in a variety of different situations, not just whenever you're at the university asking about that particular thing. You could say, was mache ich, wenn ich krank bin? What do I do when I'm sick? Was mache ich, wenn ich die Frist verpasst habe? What do I do when I've missed a deadline? Was mache ich, wenn ich keine Bestätigung bekomme? What do I do when I don't get a receipt of this or a certificate saying that you did this thing properly? And then there's one question on here that I haven't talked about yet, and that is an wen kann ich mich wenden, which is to whom can I speak about this? Like, direct me towards the person that I need to talk to about this particular issue. All right, on this slide we have a combination of things that are different at the university versus things that are at the school level or Schule or Gymnasium or whatever kind of school it is that you're going to. So we have here on the left-hand side Schule and the words that we use there, and then on the right-hand side Universität and the words that we use there. In the Schule, we would use der Schüler for a male student, die Schülerin for a female student. But at the university, you would say der Student or die Studentin for the students there. When you're going to a class in German, for a high school, you would say something like der Unterricht, which is the class or the lesson, something like that. But when you're going to that in German, you would say die Lehrveranstaltung, which is a really long word, so not a whole lot of people are using this in casual conversation. They'll usually switch it out for what kind of class it is that I mentioned before. But generally the word for what class you're going to is die Lehrveranstaltung. The word for the classroom that you're in is das Klassenzimmer when you're talking about it at the high school level or the gymnasium level. When you're at the university level, it's probably der Hörsaal, which is like a lecture hall. Die Klassenarbeit is classwork, meaning work that you do during class. And then die Klausur would be like a type of test that you take at the university. The people that you have teaching you at the gymnasium would be der Lehrer or die Lehrerin for the teacher, male or female. For the professors, there are different words. We have der Professor, die Professorin for the actual words for professor, and then we have der Dozent and die Dozentin for the kind of a more generic word rather than saying professor. All right, I think I've rambled on long enough, so we're going to call it a night. It's been fun, it's been real. Danke